Brexit has happened. These videos that I'm uploading are a sort of response to the media's suggestion that the only people that voted to leave the EU on the 23rd of June were mainly white working class racists or xenophobics. I think really there are a whole host of other reasons of why people, not just uneducated white working class, voted to leave the EU. And in the subsequent videos that I'm going to be uploading, we're going to be having views from people from Black, Asian, Hindu, Muslim, Buddhist, all different types of viewpoints and opinions, but all have things in common. They all are all working, they are all running small businesses, they all live in London, they all are trying to get on the housing ladder, and they all voted to leave the EU, so that'll be coming up soon. With regards to why, other reasons of why we decided as working class to leave the EU is really, I mean, number one would have to be down to rent prices. I think that's up there as number one, and house prices. I mean, we are the only generation that has really having to aspire to such little, especially living in London. We can only really look forward to now, I mean, if you save and save and save, especially if you're renting and you don't have parents that can pay your deposit, or you can live with them until you've saved up enough deposit from working to go and buy a property. We are the only generation that has such little to aspire to. I mean, it's near enough impossible if you're in that camp of one of the have-nots, as in terms of not having the parents and not inheriting anything, or not being on, I don't know, over £60,000 a year, especially living in London in particular, which is obviously going to be a major factor. You know, it's not just the uneducated white working class that are in those situations. It's certainly not, and we will learn from other people's opinions in the next few videos. It's not just what the media and their divide and rule tactic is suggesting. It is the uneducated predominantly white working class that have made this decision, have tipped the balance point, the 17 odd million that voted to leave the EU last Thursday. I think the second one is that wages have been frozen for quite a while in a lot of jobs, in a lot of sectors for the working class. It's not going up. It's not. It really isn't. So I think, rent prices, house prices, people trying to do everything they can as in terms of saving and scrimping and saving every penny to try and get out of the rental market, which is absolutely extortionate in London. And a third thing, I think, is that it is a protest vote. We don't have a voice as a working class. We're demonised in the media, especially white working class. I mean, the invention of the chav is a demonisation of the white working class. I don't think we're all chavs. I mean, people watching this video might think that I am, which is fine. You're entitled to your opinion. But we're not all. You can't tar us with all this, with the same brush. It's like you can't tar all immigrants. You can't say all immigrants coming into this country, regardless of whether they're from EU or non-EU, are a drain on society. You can't say that all immigration, as we're led to believe in the media a lot of the time, in certain aspects of the media, they are such a boost to the economy. Life's not black and white like that. So, not having a voice, wages frozen, rent prices, these are massive, massive reasons of why us as working class have had to, if you like, protest and vote to leave the EU. Yes, it might be naive, but what are we going to do? As I said, we're the generation that, living in London, our aspirations are, when you're renting, save every penny you can, which is a sacrifice to having a life or a social life, and then you have to move out of the area that you've grown up in. You can't even live within the M25. You have to aspire to go into other areas which you don't know anyone, and you can buy maybe a one-bedroom flat if you're lucky after saving for 6-7 years. I mean that's a joke. That's something our parents didn't have to go through. Obviously, it is going to develop a chip on the shoulder for a lot of working class people. Obviously, there are the haves, which have parents who have invested wisely, or they inherit property, or they're given a lump sum to go and increase their chances of getting a better mortgage and actually living in the area they grew up in, or living within 20-30 miles of the area they grew up in. And I'm not saying you can't move around, and it's a bad thing. Leaving the area you grew up in, great, you can do that. I mean, it's not, but having the option would be nice, and having the option of growing up in living in the city that you grew up in would also be a nice option, especially if you put roots down and you've got friends and you've still got family who are fortunate to have properties or own properties. So these are the reasons really why the working class, I think, especially in London, has voted. I mean, with regards to the rest of the country, I think also the media with the divide and rule tactic suggesting that it's only the working class and the white working class, especially the older ones, that voted to leave the EU. I think, from who I've spoke to over the last 8 months leading up to the referendum, or 6 months I should say, it's students as well. I mean, I was watching the BBC referendum results, and it was suggesting that students in areas like Manchester and in London and places where there's quite a high proportion of students, they would pretty much all vote to remain. But I spoke to students, especially from England, where the tuition fees have massively gone up and education is so expensive, especially for the working class, who are going to be saddled, I should say, with debt after they've finished their education. So obviously the middle class don't have that. I mean, in Scotland, where you saw the majority voted to remain, is it a coincidence that tuition fees are pretty much nothing? And even if there are tuition fees, it's a very, very small fraction of what the English students have to pay in England. So, to say it's all down to racist, xenophobic, working class, particularly white working class, is absolute nonsense. Look out for my next few videos, which are going to be from, as I said, other working class people, but from not white working class backgrounds. I'll see you then.